I am one of the co-founders of Connections in Mind. We're an organisation which was founded back in 2015 with the vision to level the playing field for people with executive function challenges, and by that we generally mean anyone with a neurodiverse condition. And we work with organisations such as ADHD 360 and other organisations to help people to develop strong executive functions, and we'll talk a bit more about what executive functions are in a moment. But basically they're organizational skills. They're the way that we organize our belongings, the way that we organize our emotions and regulate our emotions, and the way that we organize our memory and our thoughts as well. So that's just a quick whistle-stop tour through that. Now I'm going to try something new now, which is always makes me a little bit nervous. But I'm going to share my screen. We are going to ask you to go onto a website called menti.com. So if everyone who has access to a web browser can go onto menti.com, please. And then hopefully you can see here, there's a code here at the top of our screen, 58163885. So 58163885. You type that into the box when you get to menti.com. There's the spelling of it up there, menti.com. So when you get onto that, you'll be asked, what are you hoping for help with this evening, obviously. And we're going to be creating a word cloud now. It's all interactive, so it will happen online as we're doing it. So if you type in 3 words, 3 things that you're hoping for help with, hopefully other people will see what you've typed in. Those people who see something that they also want help with will type that in as well. And that can just help us to make sure that we're talking about the things that's going to be really relevant for everyone. So, so we've got the first one coming here. It said info on ADD diagnosis. Awesome. So someone's wanting to find out a bit more information about that. Excellent. I encourage everyone else to log on to menti.com and use the code. Here we go. We've got some things here coming up: relationships, organisation, procrastination, and insight. Wonderful. Here we go. Some more coming up here. Some things coming up: hyperfocus, staying motivated, emotion, support, studying, medication and executive functions, procrastination. Well, it's all moving around it. Procrastination is coming up quite a lot. Organisation. Wonderful. It's quite fun, isn't it, Phil and Lisa? I quite like this.
I like that.
It's cool. It's great for my ADHD and my dyslexia because it's kind of really visual. Keeps me.
Is there a relationship? Is there a relationship between the size of the word and how many people will have brought that to the fore? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's telling us that procrastination and organisation are some of the things that people really want help with, but all these other things as well. So we'll refer back to this. Lots of motivation I can see put in there as well. So we'll refer back to this as we go through this evening to make sure we keep it relevant. I'll keep it up on the slides. Wonderful. Great. If anyone's still filling it out, it'll still register, and then we'll bring it back to this slide as we're talking so that we've got it as notes. All right. So we'll keep it up. Okay. So next slide. Ooh, let me do it. Here we go. So also the other thing I wanted to find out is how many of our webinars have you attended before? So if you can use this scale to just let us know if this is your first one. So if you've attended none, if you've attended loads, then put in 5. This will just give us an idea of what, all the stuff that we've talked about before. Is this something that you've heard loads of before? Which way do we need to pitch what we're talking about, just to make it as relevant as possible for you guys? Okay, so we're just going to wait. We've got 24 odd people online, but only 15 have filled it out so far. So I'm just going to let the rest of the people fill it out. So we've got a view of this here. So look, it looks like 11 people. It's the first time they've been online with us for a webinar. But then we've got some other people who've done quite a few with us as well. So we just need to bear that in mind, Lisa and Phil, as we're going through this evening. Great. I'm going to just see if anyone else, a couple more people. No, it doesn't seem to be coming through. That's fine. That's really great, guys. Thanks so much for participating in that. It really helps us to make sure we pitch it correctly for everyone. And the final one I want to do just now before we move on and get started is to ask you how much do you know about executive functions, because I assume most of you know about ADHD, that's why you're here. So if you can rate your knowledge level, that's really, really helpful. You see it's got that sliding bar there, which I also really love, which tells us our average. I'm really into data, so I love things like this. Great, so we're all about in the middle there, which is good. Slightly skewed to having quite a lot of knowledge about EFs, so that's interesting that we've got people who've heard about them before and are interested in them, so we don't have to spend too much time explaining what they are, but I will do a little bit at some point just for those who are completely new to it, because there's a couple of people who've never heard of them before. Great, all 21 of you filled that out, so that's really, really helpful. Thanks so much. Right, I'm going to stop sharing that now, but we can come back to that word cloud as we go through, if that's helpful, guys. So just let me know if you want to have a look at it again. Okay, right, so we're here tonight to talk about all these things, all these challenges that you're facing with regarding to ADHD in your everyday lives. That's why you have signed up for this webinar. So when we ask you that, what are you hoping for help with, the key thing that came up was procrastination. And looking at it now, also organisation and emotional regulation. So those are three great ones, I think, for us to have a look at, because they really kind of the broad spectrum of EFs. So I wonder if we get started, Phil and Lisa, do you want to talk a bit about procrastination? Should we start on that one first?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to start on it. Sorry, that was just so obvious and there for the taking. Shall I dive in, Lisa, just for 2 minutes?
Go on then, you dive in and I'll close.
So most of our adult patients who have a conversation with normally me before they register with us as a service, I talk to them about why they think they might have ADHD as a grown-up. And ADHD is classically described as hyperactivity, inattention and impulsivity. And do you know what? I never hear those three words from an adult who's describing themselves with ADHD. And in fact, at about 6:30 this evening, I had a young man who come to us through our website, and I had a conversation with him, 37-year-old, owns his own business and with logistics and warehousing. And I asked him, why ADHD? What makes you think you got ADHD? He says, I'm the CEO of an incredibly successful business, but I procrastinate so much that it's starting to affect the way the business, in fact, he said, it's probably always affected the way the business has done. I don't start things off. I don't get things going. And as a man who was supposed to do that, running a business, this is starting to cripple my finances because I just don't start things. And for me, the constant reflection of not being able to start a task because we don't know how to start a task and we haven't got the skills to overcome our impairment to start a task is profoundly there in nearly every adult that comes into our clinic. And I think it's our job when we talk about procrastination to perhaps for Lisa to talk about what you see in clinic, Lisa, with procrastination, and then maybe switch a bit of a heads up here, Victoria, maybe switch to you in terms of some coping mechanisms for procrastination. I know we've got what we give to people, which will be aligned to what you do, and maybe deal with procrastination that way. So my offering is it's incredibly common in the adult population that we deal with ADHD. It's that coupled with anxiety is possibly one of the most common impairments that people label. And if I switch to Lisa and sort of say, in clinic, Lisa, what are you finding with procrastination and the impact of it on somebody's life, really?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think procrastination should be a fourth feature of ADHD. I would say, without doubt, 95% of my patients will say, well, actually, we don't always use the word procrastination. We often use the word lazy. And so we have quite a long conversation about the difference between procrastination and laziness because they look the same, but they're very different. And one is, I know what I need to do. but I just can't get going, and the other one is I can't be bothered. And so people have been labelled by others, parents, teachers, colleagues, as lazy, when actually the procrastination is huge. And generally what happens is that they start a project almost when it's due to be submitted. And therefore they might not miss a deadline, but they're not giving it their all. They're not producing work that they're more than capable of. And that then impacts on the self-esteem, anxiety, low mood. So it's generally one of my first questions, and I start that to allay and change the thought process of my patients, because it's one of the biggest things that impacts on someone's well-being and mental health a lot of the time. And we can go on to discuss how that might be helped.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a huge one. Yeah, and we call it, in terms of the executive function skill, we call it task initiation. That's the skill to kind of counteract that you need to develop in order to get started. And there are all sorts of things that you can do, strategies you can use to get started on tasks. It really is about kind of, you know, trying them all out and seeing which one works for you. But we tend to find a really good one for the people that we work with is what we call the eat the frog idea. I don't know if you've heard of this before, but it'll stick in your mind for sure. It's about getting the difficult bit done first, and then the easy bits can come later, because you know those ones you're kind of more motivated to do. So when you sit down at your desk in the morning and you've got this big thing hanging over you, don't keep pushing it back until you're really tired at the end of the day. Actually start by eating the frog and just saying, I'm going to get on with this and get that done. That can really help with pushing off those big projects. It's a really important one. Also, finding out kind of your environment, because a lot of people, you know, really like to have a tidy desk before they get started. All these type of things, you know, sometimes there can be a lot of perfectionism around what the environment needs to look like before you get started. So if that is the case, that's totally fine, but making sure that you have like some boundaries around that as well, and that it's not constantly like looking around, oh gosh, I've just seen there's a pen over there, I've got to get up and do that, I've got to sort that out, or I can't get started because the files aren't in order for this. And again, that comes back to that perfectionism thing we were talking about before we got started. But the key thing for us, we tend to find, is there's also a lot of psychology going on around the getting started as well. And there can be a lot of fear of failure that plays into that. And this idea that if I get started on this task and I do it and it's not to the standard that I'd like it to be, then I will expose myself as a fraud because people think that I'm better than I am. And that's huge for the people we work with, young people and adults as well. And it can be really debilitating. And if you think about it in terms of homework for young people, you know, if a teacher, you know, if you're really good verbally in class, which a lot of ADHD kids are, but you really struggle to get things down on paper, the actual thought of like trying to get something down on paper is the risk of you being exposed as being the stupid kid and not the bright kid that the teacher identifies you as. So that can really get in the way of homework and things like that as well. So I think it's about just reflecting and thinking like, what are the thought processes going on for me around getting started, and thinking about that, and sometimes talking about that with somebody else, a friend, a family member, a therapist or a coach can be really helpful, because reflecting and hearing that back can help you really kind of put that in perspective as well.
I wonder, Victoria, if there is also, and I'm almost probing from what I think might be the case, and throwing this one to you as the coping strategy expert, is often our patients see the task as far too big and procrastinate over what part of it I can get started with. And one of the therapy skills is the ability to break down a task which may seem overwhelming into manageable bite-sized chunks, and then applying those strategies of getting ready, how am I going to start it, what will be the triggers to start it, those things you just talked about, that initiation process, but in those smaller bite-sized chunks. And although we might see the plan of different chunks lining up, the elephant walk, as it is, it's tackling each one in turn. It seems to be something that people resonate with.
Yeah, absolutely. My my boss used to call it like having an elephant burger every day. You wouldn't sit down and eat an elephant all in one sitting. But if you eat a little burger every day, I don't really like the thing, but the metaphor. But anyway, we'll go with it because you mentioned elephants before. But yeah, just breaking it down into little bite-sized chunks means that you can get a little bit done every day. That's really, really helpful as well. And that can go with a lot of things as well, because there's a lot of procrastination about working on your executive function skills. There's always like, oh, I know I can do this. I know I can control my emotions better, inhibit my responses better. I'll get round to doing that later. And kind of getting on with it is going to be really hard too. So breaking those things down into kind of bite-sized chunks of like, right, okay, I know it's difficult for me to get started on this task. So what I'm going to do is do 2 minutes. I'm going to do 2 minutes only. And at least then I've written something. It can be anything, or whatever it is, whether it's writing or whether it's cleaning the house or whatever it is. I'm just going to do 2 minutes. And then often that 2 minutes can roll into 4, 6, 8, and all of a sudden you've done everything you needed to do. But just breaking it down so it doesn't feel so insurmountable is really important. Great stuff. Well, hopefully that's helped a little bit with the procrastination piece. So let's move on to the next one on our word cloud now that came up. And that was organisation. So for me, and our definitions of organisation, we see it as quite separate, a separate skill. And I'll just talk about our definition, and maybe we can think about the other definitions of organisation as well, because I think it's important. I think that probably came up because it was other things as well. But for us, organisation refers to the organisation of belongings. So it's like the physical tidiness. That's the organisation that we're talking about when we talk about organisation. But I know that lots of people refer to organisation as managing time, planning and prioritising what to do, and just managing workloads and being productive. That can be like organisation as well. So maybe we can talk about the two things. So Phil and Lisa, do you have any tips on or any reflections on that?
Do you know, right back at the start, and I don't think we've ever had a seminar or a conversation that hasn't mentioned Russ Barkley. And at some stage, he's probably going to put some form of protective order against me. But Russ Barkley and others talk extensively about time management in ADHD and in fact the inability to manage those day-to-day time things in ADHD. And there's an awful lot of work done by a great lady in Manchester called Feige Lieberman. And Feige focuses a lot on ADHD and hoarding and decluttering, and how that compulsion drives a lack of organisation, if you will. And I think those links are there. Russ Barkley once said to an audience of 200 psychiatrists, and I was privileged to be in the audience, forget using rating scales and complex questionnaires to diagnose anybody with ADHD. Look on their wrist, and if they haven't got a watch on, you can bang on, bet your bottom dollar that they're on their way to a diagnosis. And those things of organisational skills like time management and organisation of belongings and tidiness and almost hoarding, I think they come with the impulsivity side of ADHD. I think they come with not paying the attention to the things that matter for some other people that don't matter so much to you because your brain is wired slightly differently. And I think there is an incredible link to some of these life skills that people talk about without actually looking at neurodiversity. So somebody who is incredibly untidy, it could be because their mind is racing at a pace, focusing on different things, that they can't actually corral their thoughts into one focused place to be tidy. And, you know, I talk to a lot of teenage boys that we've helped with an assessment and diagnosis. And the one thing that changes for them is how tidy their bedroom is. It's almost, they stop being teenagers. It's really quite an interesting link between EF and the whole ADHD thing for me. What about you clinically, Lisa?
I mean, for me, organisation comes up all the time, and to be honest, in children, you would do a visual timetable, for example. So I'd be looking at difficult times of day, which as an adult, maybe with children, maybe with a job and responsibilities, the mornings and the evenings are often quite tricky. So with children, you'd do a visual timetable. That would be a dead easy thing to do. But there's nothing stopping you doing that with an adult as well. So I've got one guy who's a father, he's a businessman, and he finds mornings really difficult, and he struggles to get out of bed. So I said to him, why don't you do a timetable of what you need to do in the morning in order, with times and how long it's going to take you. Set your alarm, set a reminder alarm, and have it on your wall next to your bed so that it's there and you don't have to go searching for something. You know, so it's something as simple as that, but also giving people who've just been diagnosed permission to struggle, because, you know, they often feel like everything's a big effort and I'm no good and I'm always forgetting, and, you know, and so if they're starting on some treatment, that doesn't mean you're going to automatically pick up these new skills. You know, it's a learning curve here. So keep it simple. I'm just going to pick up on something that you've asked Phil to do.
Okay.
The lady with the hoarding in Manchester is Feige Lieberman, and she's got books, and I think her Facebook page is Focus with Feige or something.
Indeed, yeah. And I've just Googled to answer the question that was asked. If you Google Focus with Feige, you'll find her on the first page of Google.
Yeah.
And a lady who we've worked with extensively, and in fact on our website, you know, we've got the link to your program, Victoria, the Connections in Mind partnership that we've got. Feige's came in this morning for us to put on the website as a partner for us. And she's got a very good understanding of those issues of hoarding, of untidiness. And also, I think it's very fair to say for anybody else, she has a great perspective on females with ADHD as well. She's a bit of a growing legend, is Feige. So if anybody wants to focus with Feige, it's a good thing to do. So yeah, I've answered that question, and so's Lisa.
Yeah,
I think so.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Phil, could you just spell that for us dyslexics and ADHD people out there?
It's a really good point. So Feige is F-A-I-G-Y.
Okay.
F-A-I-G-Y. Focus with Feige. Lovely lady. Takes no messing, so she'll get a grip of you. That's for sure.
Great stuff. Yeah, and just to go back to what Lisa was saying, you know, about that, you know, not having an overnight change and things like that. I think a lot of the time, because, you know, we have ADHD and we're going into this situation and we want things fixed quickly because we have, you know, that's just the way that we're wired. You know, we get something out of things happening quickly. We assume that taking medication, working on our executive functions is all going to happen like overnight. Suddenly a miracle is going to happen and we're going to be a completely different person. And that's not actually what we see in reality. And when we're working on the executive functions, and just also just linking back to what you said, Lisa, about, you know, all of these things that we're talking about, these are skills. And by working and getting the medication right is one part of it, because that helps you to concentrate on what you're doing more. And so you're more able to build these skills, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that these skills are suddenly going to kind of land in your head. And they still need to be developed, because there'll be years and years of you not using these skills. That needs to be what we call myelinated in the brain, which is where the neural pathway gets a kind of insulation around it. And the more insulation you get around the neural pathway, so the more the habit becomes automatic. It's kind of like going from like a trodden path through a grass field to a super highway where cars can go at 100 miles an hour. You know, it's incredible the effect of doing things repeatedly. And the research shows that on average, you need to perform a new habit 60 times before it becomes automatic. So that's a lot of commitment, especially for people with ADHD, because the motivation to keep going at something is really challenging, which is why pairing up with a friend or family member, therapist or a coach can be really helpful, just to keep that motivation going, because then you're accountable to someone and you're much more likely to keep going at it. With regards to the organisation, I realised that there were some people who hadn't heard of executive functions before, so I just wonder if it's a good time now just to talk quickly about what they are. So executive functions are the brain processes that we find in our prefrontal cortex of our brain, which is our bit of our brain just behind our forehead. And it's the part of our brain that regulates our kind of animal instincts and helps us to perform kind of human tasks. And the reason it's called executive functions is because it's the part of your brain that helps you execute tasks, to get stuff done, basically. And what we've found in a lot of research is that this part of the brain can be underdeveloped in neurodiverse brains. And that's for a number of different reasons. It can be due to genetics, it can be due to environment, all sorts of different things. But what we also know is that by working on these things and focusing on developing these particular skills, that they can catch up. It's not like it's fixed like that forever. So we do know that working on these things can be really helpful. Now, we work with 11 executive function skills. But the executive functions are broadly classified into 3 groups. So there's the working memory, which is your ability to hold information in your head. So if you've ever walked into a room and forgotten why you've gone in there, that's your working memory. And that's really important part of the executive functioning. Then there's also the response inhibition. So that's not not following through on your instincts. So that's the real bit that kind of controls those instinctual responses. And then there's something called cognitive flexibility as well, which is ability to change plans if something comes up. Okay, so not to get fixed on, right, I've got to do it in this particular certain way. And those kind of interplay, those 3, those working memory, response inhibition and cognitive flexibility interplay to create these like 11 skills that you can kind of pinpoint to say, okay, these are the different things that I really struggle with. So they kind of overlap, as it were. And so the 11, I'm not going to go through them all because I always forget one because my working memory is really poor. But anyway, there are all sorts of different things like organisation, time management, planning and prioritisation, flexibility, emotional control, response inhibition, metacognition, which is a funny long word, but basically means your ability to self-evaluate and see how other people see you and how your behaviour is affecting other people. So that can be a skill that we can develop, but it doesn't actually come online in neurotypical brains until the age of 25 or later. So this skill is, something we often require of young people before they've actually had a chance to mature for their brains to be able to do that. So that's just a bit of a whistle-stop tour through executive functions. But when it comes to organisation, the tidiness bit is for us when we're talking about that. A key tip that we really love and that I use all the time is takes us back to chefs. Okay, so imagine you're in a busy kitchen and you've got, imagine it's, Gordon Ramsay, right? And you've got him swearing at you and you've got to get everything done. You need to have everything for your service in its place, because if it's not, you're not going to be able to put everything together fast so you can get your 100 plates of salmon, blah, 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 whatever out, okay? So chefs call this mise en place, which means everything in its place. And so if you go into a big commercial kitchen, in fact, any kitchen, you'll see that there's all the little pots where they've got all the little crudités and bits of herbs and all the different elements of the dish already prepared and ready to go, so that in a busy service that they can do everything they need to do. And so this mise en place idea is all about getting your things, your belongings, the things that you need to carry out your everyday life in places and constantly putting them back in the same place. So it might be, your car keys, you always put them back in a bowl on the hall table. It might be that in your handbag, you have a specific pocket for your phone. All of these things can really help with the organisation. So if there's one tip you take away from that, think of Gordon Ramsay, think of those busy kitchens, think of mise en place. That's a really great one for that. Great. All right, well, we're going to move on. Next one is emotional regulation, guys. I'm really glad these three came up because they're really distinct and different. So it's brilliant.
If I look at children first and then switch that into adults, we have, interestingly, the questionnaire that we screen children with has 18 questions on ADHD, but then it also has 8 questions on oppositional behaviour, which is all hinged into dysregulation of emotion, if you will. And we find, and Lisa's got some great ways of explaining how children can struggle with their ADHD and their emotional regulation and their tolerance and how much bandwidth they've got and how they can explode and why. And I will genuinely want to leave that to Lisa. But it's really interesting to see the links between oppositional behaviour. And for me, when I started looking at this, I found that kids from the age of 6 started to recognise that they don't fit in, they're struggling at school, they're struggling to get things done the same way as other people with the consummate ease of the person sat next to them there. And that starts to bring all sorts of pressures upon a young person and all sorts of struggles that come from that struggle, if you will, an emotional struggle that comes from inability struggles. And over time that leads to oppositional behaviours and disorders of conduct and dysregulation of emotions. Now, if we switch that into adulthood, the ability of a person with ADHD to fall out with somebody and not be able to take that step back and control that is profound. And it really genuinely is. And interestingly, almost conversely with that is the conduct of a person with ADHD may be received as being emotionally dysregular, but actually nothing could be further from their mind than being cross with somebody or being angry with somebody. And if I may just give you a quick anecdote going way back to 18, 19 years ago, as a police officer, together with my then wingman, Steve Brown, we went to an ADHD parenting conference in Southport in Merseyside. We're both in full uniform. We've got ITV television cameras with us because we were these cops that were dealing with mental health, and there was apparently something interesting in that. And we walked through the door of this room, and this lady, I'll say approached Steve, but she launched at him from about 30 foot away, got straight into his, like, here, and said, "You've not answered my emails. You say you want to be interested in ADHD, but you've not answered your emails. You're terrible. You've got no right to be in this building, blah, 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 blah." Now, ordinarily, anybody, never mind a 6-foot cop, would sort of take a frontage at this and think, flipping heck, who's this really rude, aggressive, challenging person? But we'd worked really hard on this, ready to go into this environment, this cauldron of parents who, it could have been interpreted that we were going in the room to say all your children are criminals because they've got ADHD. Thankfully, nobody saw it that way. So we practiced and re-practiced our skills. And Steve literally, physically took a step backwards, moved away from this conflict scenario where his body space had been invaded, because that's something that's really common. And said, "Honestly, I've no idea who you are. How can I help?" And the emotion just died, the anger just died, and they went on to become really good colleagues and friends. And the point that needs to be made is that I think there are issues with emotional dysregulation, there obviously are, but there are also issues with an individual not knowing how they can come over with their ADHD behaviours as not controlling their emotions, when actually all they're doing is being themselves and there isn't an angry bone in their body in that moment. And the two can often be seen as exactly the same thing, can't they, Lisa? We see that quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely. So what Phil was alluding to earlier is a bit of a diagram that I use all the time. In fact, I think I've used it 3 times today already. So the emotional dysregulation in children and adults looks a little bit like this. So this line here is someone's lose it line, whatever that might look like, and it'll be different in all people. And when I see patients to assess, they're obviously untreated. So although they look normal to myself and them, they're generally running just below this lose it line all the time. And then one little thing happens and they have a blip and then it's gone. You know, they just lose it. Now, good treatment and optimized treatment will bring that down straight away, not to a baseline, because this has built up over years, so it's not going to disappear overnight, but it becomes manageable, because then they have a little blip and we're nowhere near this lose it line. It would have to be something really big for people to become emotionally dysregular. And something else that Phil also picked up on about the oppositional behaviour, you know, children aren't born oppositional, they become oppositional, and that is usually because for years they hear their name being mentioned in a negative way, or they hear the word no, or they're told off by teachers, parents multiple times a day, and eventually they just think, oh, blow it, why be good? Why do what I'm told? Because I'm going to get into trouble anyway. So these two very sort of similar but interlinked types of emotional dysregulation. And I think it's, for me, it's about acknowledging that and getting the diagnosis right, getting the treatment right, and you're halfway there with your emotional dysregulation, but also changing the way people talk or think about themselves has a big impact on that kind of emotional state. So when I first assess someone, I'm listening to the language that they use about themselves, because it has a big impact on how emotional they are and how quickly they might fire up. And I'll pull them up on it, and we'll have that conversation, and then we'll talk about it when we review in 3 weeks. So it's a big part of my discussion with patients, for sure. Yeah.
I think there's a question in there, Victoria, about what's the medicine for emotional dysregulation, and I think we just need to, I'd like to just unpack that for 1 second. You won't find a medicine where it says this is a medicine for emotional dysregulation per se. It's about looking at why somebody is dysregulated and struggling with their emotions. And I think we have that a lot in neurodiversity, where we are looking at the outcome that we see and trying to put a label, diagnostic label to the outcome, where actually if we were to look at the cause of an overall pattern of behaviour and an overall pattern of impairment, for want of a word. I'm not sure I always like describing these things as impairments, but and then we treat that overall cause. And as you explained so eloquently there, Victoria, at the start, executive functioning, which is co-joined with ADHD. You can't discouple them, uncouple them. That's a better word, uncouple, discouple. Where did that come from? You can't uncouple them, that they are together, but it's all about what's going on in here as the conductor of the orchestra of the rest of the instruments in the brain. And you know, between us, we know that the best model is to see if medical treatment can do some good in here, and then how can therapeutic interventions such as coaching, training, therapy, how can they help undo the learned behaviours, the skills that we think we've got, now that we've got a whole different chance in life. And I think rather than there being a medicine for emotional dysregulation, there are treatment therapy packages of care that actually revolve around every dynamic of helping somebody increase that gap between where they are and the lose it line. And that's a combination of, and that's why we work with you and your guys, Victoria, it is a definite combination of the two. And some people prefer to go down the medical route first and then tap on the therapy. Some people would prefer to do the therapy and then see if they need medicine afterwards. We've got views, it doesn't matter. The ultimate is to get somebody to a point where they're actually in a position where the gap between where they are and their lose it line is manageable and managed. And if I can, I can imagine our audience tonight are all adults, but within it, a lot of those adults will be children in the home. And what we're talking about in adults, we see in children. So I'm just going to go back to children for 1 second. A lot of our children who are patients of ours, when we talk about these things and the coping mechanisms they have, I would rather go to the toilet 10 times in my maths lesson than be caught out for not following the track of the lesson because I can't follow it and I don't want to look an idiot in front of my peers. So there you've got a big set of children who have developed their own individual coping mechanism to the point where the school think they've got a urinary tract infection because they're going to the toilet so much, but they know the next question is going to call them out and they don't want to take part in it. Now, those who haven't joined those dots up start to get frustrated about what's coming next in the classroom and always being the one that can't answer the question and can't even remember what the teacher was saying because, oh, look, there's a butterfly at the top of the ceiling as opposed to in your front room. And those kids often lash out and will not be able to, or almost deliberately behave in a way that is not regulated, so that they'd rather be told off than be called out for not knowing that 2 and 2 equals 4. And we have to be very, very careful when we're defining emotional dysregulation as to exactly what is going on and what's the mindset of the individual involved. And I'm quite passionate about this because I think a lot of our children and adults with ADHD are labelled as, look at me with my hand, I'm so passionate, my hand's going now. But I am passionate that they're mislabelled as being angry, naughty people, when actually they are people who are struggling, and that may bring to the fore some form of inability to manage their emotions at that moment. And rather than saying you need to behave, we actually need to work out why the hell they've got this struggle and what more can we do to help them not have that struggle in the first place. And that to me is a sea change in I don't know what's just happened. It's gone dark. Lights are going out. It's a sea change in life that actually we need to help people with more than just trying to say to them the classic, you have chosen to misbehave, therefore you can choose to not do that. That is not the case with people with 4EF skills and ADHD. And right back to my policing days, Victoria, I know I've locked people up who couldn't control their emotions, and I should have taken a step back and said, actually, what the hell's going on here, fella? What's wrong and how can we help? And that Steve Brown taking one step back and saying, I have absolutely no idea why you're having a go at me, but how can I help? And if only society could grip that for this swathe of our community, we'd get a big change. Sorry, passionate outburst, but
outburst. And I just want to build on that passionate outburst because we share this passion about this. This is a key thing that we're working with schools as well, and we do work with schools to help them to understand what's going on here, because a lot of behaviour policies, and you quite rightly pointed this out, Phil, a lot of behaviour policies in schools are absolutely set up to make ADHD kids fail and for them to be constantly in detention and on the path to exclusion. And we feel that's really, really unfair. And the key thing that we do with schools, and hopefully this will resonate with everyone online here, and please, this is relevant for everyone, not just for kids as well, but just hopefully like in the context it will help, is that we work with this hand model of the brain. Look, I'm doing this again, Phil and Lisa, I know I do it regularly, but I just think it's so powerful. The hand model of the brain, so you've got the brain stem here, and you've got the instincts, which is kind of like the thumb here, and then you've got your executive functions, your prefrontal cortex, which sits over the top, that's regulating and controlling those instincts. And that's kind of like how it looks anyway, if it's kind of like in a cross profile. And what happens is, if we're stressed, or if we're tired, or if we haven't eaten, so like hangry is an actual thing, like it isn't, there's neuroscience around hangry. If we haven't eaten, slept, if we're stressed, anxious, if we haven't exercised regularly, our executive functions are physically disconnected from our instincts. They are not doing that role of the conductor. And we call that flipping your lid if you use this hand model of the brain. And it's a really great way of just communicating with anyone. You don't have to be a child to do this. You could be an adult as well. We use it in our family all the time. My daughter has a really low level of tolerance, and she flips her lid all the time, and we're working with her constantly to try and build skills and strategies for her to regulate her emotions better. But also mum and dad flip their lid, right? We're all human beings, and this is a human condition. This isn't just for people with ADHD, it's not just for children. And so having this language to talk about it, and also this model as well to talk about what's going on, can help people to really understand what's going on in those environments. So it can be something that you can use at work as well. You can talk to people about it and say, look, this is what happens for me, when I'm tired, when I'm stressed, when you put me in a difficult situation, I find it really difficult to control my instincts, which are to run away or to fight, or, you know, fight or freeze, all of that stuff, because I'm in that situation. So if you can help me in that moment to just give me a bit of space and say, look, do you want to take a moment, just, you know, regroup, come back. Then once those executive functions are back again and working, then you can have a rational conversation with someone about what's happened, and they can, and you can work with them on strategies to help them not do it again in the past. And Phil, you've got a great example of when you worked with a young person, I think, and he was about to go in and get expelled, but he managed to use his techniques that you'd worked with him on to regulate his emotions before he was taken into the headmaster's office, and he actually was able to have a rational conversation with the headmaster and not get expelled, because he used those techniques of self-regulation in that moment to get his executive functions back online. So hand model of the brain, everyone. Dan Siegel is the guy. In the follow-up email tomorrow, I'll send a link to a video that you can use, and like I said, it's not just for kids, it can work really well with adults as well.
It's sort of one of the things you said in the kind of blurb for today was links to driving and the executive functions connected to driving, and I picked up on that when planning and prepping, and of course road rage has become a thing of, you know, a label of the last 10 years, hasn't it? And the links for me, I talk about ADHD and driving from a safety perspective at length. Have done it. I was a policeman, of course I have done. I was a traffic cop, and then, but it's only in the moments of prepping for this, I suddenly thought, yeah, but what about road rage and driving for this ADHD community? And, you know, we trot out figures of 4 times more likely to crash a car, 7 times more likely to have a serious accident as opposed to a little bump, and blah, blah, blah. But actually, I'm just starting to think live in the moment. I'm thinking out loud, yeah, but what about road rage and emotional dysregulation when you're behind the wheel of a car? And I think, Lisa, that's something we need to start focusing on with our patient group in terms of what can we do to help people. And I think I'd link back to you, Victoria. And I think, you know, we've been publishing these papers, these T3 papers, as we call them. And I'd like to do one specifically on the links between emotional dysregulation, driving a vehicle, and having ADHD. And I think that would be a really powerful, pointed piece of work, because I think we've missed that up until now, over 20 years, Lisa, that we can bring it together, a number of different elements of this. And for all of us, I'd like to bring that back in a month or so, Victoria, with a paper. And our papers aren't boringly reedy things. They're aimed at the audience that should be reading them. And I'd like the 3 of us to have that as an outcome from today, which we've never done before, is to co-author a piece on road rage and EF and ADHD, because I think that's wanting for people to get a bit of advice on how to stop that happening and how to control it. And I think there's a penny just dropped for me there. And sorry to hog that, but I think that could be a really useful piece.
On that point, I think during this time of COVID, I don't know if any other ones noticed this as well, but road rage for me, I've noticed many more people getting angry on the roads. I think people are at a bit of the end of their tether at the moment, because it's just, everyone's frustrated, everyone's stressed, everyone's tired, everyone's over COVID. And so they're much more easy to fly off the handle. That kind of level, like you're talking about, Lisa, is lower than it would be, or higher than it would be before. And you know, so I think it really plays into this. And that brings us back again to this idea of the environment, or what's going on for us, really playing into that. And if people are interested, I did an interview with Adele Diamond, who is like the foremost cognitive neuroscientist about executive functions in the world. I did an interview with her back at the beginning of lockdown about how the stress of COVID is going to impact our executive functions. So she's very vocal about that in the interview. So I'll put a link as well in the notes, which will be sent out to you guys tomorrow morning. To take a look at that too. But basically what she's saying is that the stress of COVID means that we've got to be kinder to ourselves and to other people, because these things are going to be more difficult for us to actually do in this time.
I think that could be really exciting. Yeah, good.
Great. Wonderful. Well, we've talked quite a lot today. I do want to just finish off by doing a bit of a poll about how helpful you found this evening, and then we'll finish off by just both organisations just saying how you can get in contact and what will be kind of the follow up from this, so that you're aware of what's available for you. So if you can go back to menti.com, please, everybody. Hopefully. And then I will try and share my screen. Does that come up? Is that sharing? There we go. And then I would like you to use emojis, because I love emojis. I'd like you to select how you feel about today's webinar. And so we've got loved it, glad I attended, met is kind of like, oh, you know, could have done something else. Bored was like, oh gosh, really shouldn't have been here, and the waste of time is like, could have spent something else the rest of my time. So it's lovely to see lots of glad I attended coming in and loved it. That's really encouraging for us, because you know, this is something we do out of pure passion and for the cause and dedication to helping people. So that's great. But feel free, if there was anything, you know, if you did feel meh or bored about it, you know, please do let us know, because we want to improve. Like, that is, you know, we want to be doing this to help people. There's no point us getting up here and chatting for an hour if it's not helping people, not having those outcomes that people need. All right, well, I'll leave that up now where we're just talking. Oh, I forgot, most people have filled it out, so I'm going to close it down. So guys, do you want to tell everyone a little bit more about how they can get in contact if some stuff tonight has resonated, and what they can do, what next steps might be?
Yeah, I'll give everybody Lisa's home phone number. It's so we conduct most of our world through the web and a web portal. And unashamedly, it's ADHD-360.com. We're available on all the social media platforms. You'll normally find us under that name as well. If I may, Victoria, you know, you talk about we wouldn't do this if we weren't trying to help. We've been publishing a series of papers. I think paper 6 should come out by Friday. And the ones I had open today, in case I needed prompts, were about school and about driving and other things. And they're all available, free downloads on our website under resources. And I would encourage anybody to just pick them off, have a look at them, read them, throw them in the bin, circulate them, do whatever you want. But just as much as the passion for tonight and these webinars, the passion to actually provide some material that people can to use whenever you feel is deployable, just deploy it at your will. Rather excitingly, a very, very respected paediatrician threw at me the other day the driving leaflet I produced when I was a police officer 15 years ago, saying, I still use this in clinic today. And I think that's a really great motivator that, you know, we can produce written word, and 15 years later, people are still using it. So please do have a poke around our website for some resources on ADHD stuff. And I'm sure you're going to give people the clue as to where your resources are, for connections in mind. And we've increased our presence in social media quite a lot lately. And please join us, follow us, give us a poke if you need us to do something in particular, because we don't have all of the answers as to what your needs are, but we'll certainly go out and find the answer to those needs if it's humanly possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks so much, Phil. That's really helpful. And just to finish off, yeah, if you need any support in the executive functions, we do offer a range of different coaching solutions to help people. So if you need someone to help you through the changes that you want to make, to be there to support you to do this, we do offer that. We now have a range of things, from one-to-one bespoke services all the way through to kind of group work as well. And we're launching what we call the Connected Club over the next few weeks, which is going to be a group session. So very much kind of like being online like this, workshops, but also some one-to-one coaching sessions as well, over a 12-week period. So we've got all sorts of different things for different budgets. So do get in contact with us and we'll see what we can do to help you out. We've also got a whole load of free resources as well. We do have our Facebook support groups, which may have been how you've come to us this evening, but executive function support group for parents and executive function support group for adults. And we're posting daily on that with practical hints and tips about how you can improve your executive functions and to keep you motivated to know that other people out there are struggling with these things. And finally, I'm just going to post in the chat as well. We've got our online learning platform, cimlearning.com, which has a whole load of free and paid for online video courses and resources that you can access and download to help you build strong executive functions. To learn more about it, you'll see that Phil's interview is up there for free. As well, we have a free course for people wanting to learn more about executive functions. So it's got about what executive functions are, what executive function challenges look like in real life. So what's the kind of what you're going to see in people, and then also some handy hints and tips about how you can develop strong executive functions in the people that you're working with. So it's really aimed more at kind of parents and teachers, but really helpful for adults as well, just to kind of understand these things. Great, well, we're bang on time. Our time management is improving, guys. I think we should give ourselves a pat on the back. Normally we run over by about 10 minutes on these things because we're so passionate, we can't stop talking, which is lovely. But just to say thank you so much for both of you for giving up your evenings this evening. And Lisa, I don't know if you want to just say something quickly before we go. Have we got you?
Shall I jump in there then in that gap? I've just noticed that we've got somebody watching this from Bogota in Colombia. That's amazing. That has made my night. That we picked up a patient from Uganda today, and we've now got somebody listening on this webinar from Colombia. So the international footprint, the tentacles of the octopus stretch even further. That's fantastic. I think Lisa missed your question there.
I did. I missed your question. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying, did you want to say something before we sign off?
Well, no, I was just, it's been really interesting tonight. I love doing these webinars. I think the more we can do, the better. So if we could get some really good feedback from people, positive or negative, we want to keep doing this, but we want to do stuff that helps you guys. So yeah, good feedback would be great.
Absolutely. We have a strong growth mindset, both organisations. We're always trying to do better. So please do let us know. All right, guys. Well, we'll leave you to it. Enjoy your evenings or your daytimes or whatever time it is with you, wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you on the next one.